Hello everyone, welcome to Rush Learning Hub. And in this lecture we will begin Unit 3 of UGC NET Environmental Science, which deals with environmental biology. Environmental biology is one of the most important and high-scoring units in the UGC NET examination. In this unit, we will study how living organisms interact with their environment and how ecosystems function. Throughout this chapter, we will cover important topics such as ecology as an interdisciplinary science, ecosystem structure and functions, energy flow, food chains and food webs, biogeochemical cycles, ecological succession, biodiversity and conservation, population ecology, community ecology, toxicology, microbiology, and environmental biotechnology. These concepts are frequently asked in UGC NET paper 2 and are essential for understanding environmental systems and sustainable development. So, if you are preparing for UGC NET Environmental Science, this lecture series will provide conceptual clarity along with exam-oriented explanations. Let's begin our journey into environmental biology and explore the fascinating relationships between organisms and their environment. Let's get started. Hello everyone, welcome to Rush Learning Hub. I am Sunil Chauhan, and in this lecture we will begin Unit 3 of UGC NET Environmental Science, which deals with environmental biology. Environmental biology is one of the most important and high-scoring units in the UGC NET examination. In this unit, we will study how living organisms interact with their environment and how ecosystems function. Throughout this chapter, we will cover important topics such as ecology as an interdisciplinary science, ecosystem structure and functions, energy flow, food chains and food webs, biogeochemical cycles, ecological succession, biodiversity and conservation, population ecology, community ecology, toxicology, microbiology, and environmental biotechnology. These concepts are frequently asked in UGC NET paper 2 and are essential for understanding environmental systems and sustainable development. So, if you are preparing for UGC NET Environmental Science, this lecture series will provide conceptual clarity along with exam-oriented explanations. Let's begin our journey into environmental biology and explore the fascinating relationships between organisms and their environment. Let's get started. Let us understand human ecology and ecosystem structure. Human ecology deals with the relationship between humans and their environment. It explains how human activities, settlements, and resource utilization influence ecological balance. Human beings depend on natural resources for food, water, energy, and shelter. Therefore, maintaining harmony between society and nature is essential for sustainable development. An ecosystem consists of two major components, abiotic components and biotic components. Abiotic components are the non-living parts of the environment and include light, water, soil, temperature, and air. Biotic components are the living organisms present in the ecosystem. These are classified into producers, consumers, and decomposers. Producers, mainly green plants, prepare food through photosynthesis. Consumers depend on other organisms for food, while decomposers break down dead organic matter and recycle nutrients back into the environment. Thus, the interaction between biotic and abiotic components forms a functional ecosystem and maintains ecological balance. This concept forms the foundation for understanding ecosystem functions and energy flow, which we will study in the next section. Let us understand the major functions and ecological processes that maintain an ecosystem. One of the most important functions of an ecosystem is energy flow. Energy enters the ecosystem in the form of sunlight and is captured by producers through photosynthesis. This energy is then transferred to consumers through different trophic levels. According to Lindemann's 10% law, only about 10% of the energy available at one trophic level is transferred to the next level, while the remaining energy is lost as heat and metabolic activities. Energy transfer occurs through food chains and food webs. A food chain represents a linear pathway of energy flow, whereas a food web consists of interconnected food chains that provide greater stability to the ecosystem. Another important process is the biogeochemical cycle, which involves the continuous movement of nutrients between living organisms and the physical environment. Major cycles include the water cycle, carbon cycle, nitrogen cycle, phosphorus cycle, and sulfur cycle. Ecosystems also undergo ecological succession, which is the gradual and predictable change in community structure over time. Succession may be primary, beginning on barren surfaces, or secondary, occurring in previously inhabited areas. Thus, energy flow, nutrient cycling, and ecological succession are fundamental processes that ensure the stability and sustainability of ecosystems. These concepts are among the most frequently asked topics in the UGC NET Environmental Science examination. Now, let us discuss species diversity and ecosystem stability, which are fundamental concepts in ecology and frequently asked topics in the UGC NET Environmental Science examination. Species diversity refers to the variety and abundance of species present in a particular ecosystem. It is generally classified into three levels: alpha diversity, beta diversity, and gamma diversity. Alpha diversity represents the species diversity within a particular habitat or community. It indicates local species richness. Beta diversity refers to the change in species composition between different habitats or ecosystems. It measures the extent of species turnover from one habitat to another. Gamma diversity represents the overall diversity of a large geographical region and reflects the combined diversity of several ecosystems. Another important ecological concept is the ecotone. An ecotone is a transitional zone between two different ecosystems, such as the region between a forest and a grassland. Ecotones usually support organisms from both adjoining communities and therefore exhibit high biodiversity. Associated with ecotones is the concept of edge effect. Edge effect refers to the increased species diversity and population density found at the boundary between two ecosystems. Due to the availability of resources from both habitats, edge regions generally support a greater number of species than the interior regions. Next, let us understand habitat and ecological niche. Habitat refers to the physical place where an organism lives and obtains its resources. It is often described as the natural home of an organism. Now, let us discuss. On the other hand, ecological niche refers to the functional role and position of an organism within an ecosystem. It includes how an organism utilizes resources, interacts with other species, and contributes to energy flow and nutrient cycling. In simple terms, habitat represents the address of an organism, whereas niche represents its profession or role in the ecosystem. Another important concept is ecosystem stability. Ecosystem stability is the ability of an ecosystem to maintain its structure and functions in the face of environmental disturbances. Several factors influence ecosystem stability, including species diversity, climate, productivity, nutrient cycling, and human activities. Generally, ecosystems with higher biodiversity are more stable and resilient because they possess greater resistance and recovery capacity against disturbances. Ecosystems also provide numerous services, that are essential for human survival and well-being. These are collectively known as ecosystem services. Provisioning services include food, fresh water, timber, fuel, and medicinal resources. Regulating services include climate regulation, water purification, flood control, and disease regulation. Supporting services include nutrient cycling, soil formation, and primary productivity, which sustain all other ecosystem processes. Cultural services provide recreational, aesthetic, spiritual, and educational benefits to society. Therefore, species diversity, habitat, niche, ecotones, and ecosystem services collectively contribute to ecosystem stability and sustainability. These concepts are highly important from the UGC NET perspective, and questions are frequently asked on alpha, beta, and gamma diversity, edge effect, habitat versus niche, and the classification of ecosystem services. On the other hand, Now, let us discuss one of the most important ecological processes in environmental biology, namely biogeochemical cycles. Biogeochemical cycles are the natural pathways through which essential chemical elements and nutrients are continuously circulated between the living and non-living components of the environment. The term biogeochemical is derived from three words, bio meaning living organisms, geo meaning earth, and chemical referring to the movement of elements. These cycles maintain the availability of nutrients and ensure the continuity of life on Earth. The major biogeochemical cycles include the water cycle, carbon cycle, nitrogen cycle, phosphorus cycle, and sulfur cycle. Let us first understand the water cycle, also known as the hydrological cycle. The water cycle is driven by solar energy and involves the continuous movement of water between the atmosphere, hydrosphere, lithosphere, and biosphere. The major processes involved are evaporation, transpiration, condensation, precipitation, infiltration, and surface runoff. Through these processes, water is continuously recycled, maintaining the water balance on Earth and supporting all forms of life. Next is the carbon cycle. Carbon is the fundamental constituent of carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, and nucleic acids. Carbon dioxide present in the atmosphere is absorbed by plants during photosynthesis and converted into organic matter. Now, this carbon is transferred to herbivores and carnivores through food chains. Respiration, decomposition, and combustion release carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere. The oceans also act as major reservoirs of carbon and play an important role in regulating atmospheric carbon dioxide concentrations. Disturbances in the carbon cycle due to excessive burning of fossil fuels contribute significantly to global warming and climate change. Another extremely important cycle from the UGC NET perspective is the nitrogen cycle. Nitrogen constitutes approximately 78% of the atmosphere, but atmospheric nitrogen cannot be directly utilized by most organisms. Therefore, atmospheric nitrogen must be converted into biologically usable forms through nitrogen fixation. Nitrogen fixation is carried out by free-living bacteria such as Azotobacter and symbiotic bacteria like Rhizobium. The major stages of the nitrogen cycle include nitrogen fixation, ammonification, nitrification, assimilation, and denitrification. Nitrifying bacteria convert ammonia into nitrites and nitrates, whereas denitrifying bacteria convert nitrates back into atmospheric nitrogen. Nitrogen is essential for the synthesis of proteins, nucleic acids, and chlorophyll. Now, let us move to the phosphorus cycle. Phosphorus is an important component of ATP, DNA, RNA, and phospholipids. Unlike other cycles, the phosphorus cycle does not possess a gaseous phase, making it a sedimentary cycle. Phosphorus originates from rocks through weathering and enters the soil. Plants absorb phosphate ions from the soil, and these are transferred to animals through food chains. This carbon is after the death and decomposition of organisms. Phosphorus returns to the soil and sediments. Due to the absence of an atmospheric phase, the phosphorus cycle is comparatively slower than other nutrient cycles. The sulfur cycle is another important sedimentary cycle. Sulfur is a constituent of amino acids such as cysteine and methionine and is essential for protein synthesis. Sulfur compounds are released into the atmosphere through volcanic eruptions, decomposition, and industrial activities. Microorganisms play a significant role in converting sulfur compounds between different oxidation states. The sulfur cycle is closely associated with the formation of acid rain when sulfur dioxide reacts with atmospheric moisture. Biogeochemical cycles perform several ecological functions. They ensure the continuous availability of nutrients, maintain ecosystem productivity, regulate environmental quality, and connect biotic and abiotic components of ecosystems. Any disruption in these cycles can lead to ecological imbalance, reduced soil fertility, eutrophication, and climate change. Therefore, biogeochemical cycles are fundamental to ecosystem functioning and sustainability. From the UGC NET examination perspective, remember that the phosphorus cycle lacks a gaseous phase, nitrogen fixation is performed by microorganisms, and the carbon cycle plays a major role in regulating Earth's climate. Questions based on the steps of the nitrogen cycle, reservoirs of carbon, and sedimentary versus gaseous cycles are frequently asked in the examination. After the death and now, let us discuss one of the most important and frequently asked topics in UGC NET Environmental Science, namely ecological succession. Ecological succession refers to the gradual, orderly, and predictable process of change in the species composition and community structure of an ecosystem over time. It represents the natural development of a biological community from a simple pioneer stage to a stable climax stage. According to Eugene Odom, succession is the orderly process of community development involving changes in species structure and community processes with time. Ecological succession is a dynamic process through which ecosystems recover from disturbances and gradually attain ecological stability. Broadly, ecological succession is classified into two major types: primary succession and secondary succession. Primary succession begins in an area that is completely barren and devoid of soil and living organisms. Such habitats include newly formed volcanic rocks, lava flows, sand dunes, and glacial deposits. The first organisms to colonize these areas are known as pioneer species. Typically, lichens and mosses act as pioneer communities because they possess the ability to survive under extreme conditions and initiate soil formation. As weathering and decomposition proceed, grasses and herbs gradually establish themselves, followed by shrubs and eventually trees. Over a long period, a stable and self-sustaining climax community is formed. Primary succession is an extremely slow process and may require hundreds to thousands of years to reach completion. In contrast, secondary succession occurs in areas where a previously existing community has been disturbed due to natural or anthropogenic factors, but the soil remains intact. Examples of secondary succession include abandoned agricultural lands, areas affected by forest fires, floods, storms, and deforestation. Now, let us discuss, since soil and nutrients are already present, secondary succession proceeds much faster than primary succession and may take only years or decades to establish a mature ecosystem. The process of succession involves a series of stages known as seral stages. The first stage is the pioneer stage, where hardy species such as lichens and mosses colonize the habitat. This is followed by intermediate stages, characterized by the establishment of grasses, herbs, shrubs, and young trees. During these stages, species diversity, biomass, and nutrient accumulation increase progressively. Finally, the ecosystem reaches the climax stage, which represents a stable, mature, and self-perpetuating community that remains in dynamic equilibrium with the prevailing environmental conditions. The climax community is considered the final stage of succession unless disturbed by external factors. Several factors influence the rate and direction of ecological succession. These include climatic conditions, topography, soil characteristics, nutrient availability, species interactions, and disturbances such as fire, floods, grazing, and human activities. Since soil ecological succession plays a crucial role in ecosystem development and stability. It promotes soil formation and nutrient accumulation, enhances biodiversity, increases ecosystem productivity, and facilitates the recovery of ecosystems after disturbances. Succession also contributes to habitat development and forms the ecological basis for restoration and conservation planning. From the UGC NET examination perspective, it is important to remember that lichens are the pioneer species in lithosphere succession, while climax communities represent the final stable stage. Primary succession occurs on bare substrates without soil, whereas secondary succession begins in previously inhabited areas where soil is already present. Another important concept is that succession is directional and predictable, leading ecosystems towards greater complexity, biomass, and stability. Therefore, ecological succession can be regarded as nature's mechanism for transforming simple and disturbed habitats into stable and self-sustaining ecosystems. Understanding this process is fundamental to ecology because it explains how ecosystems develop, recover, and maintain long-term ecological balance. Ecosystem classification and the major types of ecosystems found on Earth. An ecosystem is a structural and functional unit of nature consisting of living organisms interacting with their physical environment. Based on climatic conditions, water availability, vegetation, and ecological characteristics, ecosystems are classified into several major types. Let us begin with desert ecosystems. Desert ecosystems are characterized by low rainfall, high evaporation rates, and extreme temperatures. Deserts may be classified into hot deserts, such as the Sahara Desert, and cold deserts, such as Ladakh in India. Vegetation in desert ecosystems is mainly xerophytic and includes cacti and drought-resistant shrubs. Organisms inhabiting deserts exhibit various physiological and behavioral adaptations to survive under water-stressed conditions. Next is the forest ecosystem, which represents one of the most productive terrestrial ecosystems. Forest ecosystems are dominated by trees and support a rich diversity of plants, animals, fungi, and microorganisms. They play an important role in carbon sequestration, oxygen production, nutrient cycling, and climate regulation. Depending on climatic conditions, forests may be tropical, temperate, or boreal in nature. Another important ecosystem is the rangeland ecosystem. Rangelands are dominated by grasses, shrubs, and herbaceous vegetation and are used extensively for grazing livestock and wild herbivores. These ecosystems contribute significantly to primary productivity and nutrient cycling. Wetlands constitute another unique ecosystem and represent transitional zones between terrestrial and aquatic environments. Wetlands include marshes, swamps, bogs, and floodplains. They are highly productive ecosystems and provide essential ecological services such as water purification, groundwater recharge, flood control, and habitat for migratory birds. Aquatic ecosystems are broadly divided into lotic and lentic ecosystems. Lotic ecosystems are characterized by flowing water. Rivers, streams, and brooks are examples of lotic ecosystems. Due to continuous water movement, these ecosystems possess relatively higher dissolved oxygen levels and support diverse aquatic organisms. In contrast, lentic ecosystems are characterized by standing or stagnant water. Lakes, ponds, reservoirs, and wetlands are examples of lentic ecosystems. Stratification and nutrient accumulation are important features of lentic water bodies. Another ecologically significant ecosystem is the estuarine ecosystem. Estuaries are regions where freshwater from rivers mixes with seawater. Mangrove forests are typical examples of estuarine ecosystems and are among the most productive ecosystems on Earth. Mangroves provide nursery grounds for fishes, protect coastal areas from erosion, and act as effective carbon sinks. In India, the Sundarbans represent one of the largest mangrove ecosystems. Finally, the oceanic ecosystem represents the largest ecosystem on Earth. Covering nearly 71% of the Earth's surface, oceans play a crucial role in regulating global climate and supporting marine biodiversity. Oceanic ecosystems are divided into various zones such as the littoral zone, neritic zone, and pelagic zone, each supporting distinct communities of organisms. Lotic ecosystems refer to flowing water systems, whereas lentic ecosystems represent standing water bodies. Wetlands are often called the kidneys of the landscape because of their role in water purification. Mangrove ecosystems are characteristic features of estuaries and provide protection against coastal erosion. The oceanic ecosystem is the largest ecosystem on the planet and serves as a major regulator of global biogeochemical cycles. Therefore, the diversity of ecosystems across the Earth reflects variations in climate, water availability, and species composition, ultimately contributing to ecological balance and sustaining life on our planet. Lotic ecosystems are. A biome is a large ecological unit characterized by distinct climatic conditions, vegetation, and associated animal communities. Biomes represent major life zones of the Earth and are primarily determined by temperature and precipitation patterns. Each biome possesses unique physical conditions and supports characteristic flora and fauna adapted to those conditions. Let us begin with the tundra biome. Another important biome is the highland icy alpine biome. This biome occurs at high altitudes where temperature decreases with elevation. The vegetation mainly consists of alpine grasses, shrubs, and small herbs. Animals such as yak, snow leopard, Himalayan teher, and mountain goats are adapted to survive under low temperatures and reduced oxygen levels. The chaparral biome is characterized by hot, dry summers and mild, wet winters. Vegetation mainly consists of drought-resistant shrubs and small trees with thick leaves adapted to minimize water loss. Periodic wildfires are common in chaparral ecosystems and play an important role in maintaining ecological balance. The savanna biome represents tropical grasslands with scattered trees and distinct wet and dry seasons. Savannas support a rich diversity of herbivores and carnivores, including elephants, giraffes, zebras, lions, and cheetahs. These ecosystems are maintained by seasonal rainfall and periodic fires. Finally, the tropical rainforest biome is considered the most diverse biome on Earth. It is characterized by high temperature, abundant rainfall, and dense evergreen vegetation throughout the year. Tropical rainforests possess multilayered vegetation and exhibit the highest species diversity among all terrestrial ecosystems. These forests are often referred to as the lungs of the earth because of their immense role in carbon sequestration and oxygen production. The tundra biome is characterized by permafrost, the taiga biome is dominated by coniferous forests, and tropical rainforests possess the highest biodiversity. Similarly, savannas are tropical grasslands with scattered trees, while chaparral vegetation is adapted to Mediterranean climatic conditions. Thus, biomes represent large-scale ecological communities whose distribution depends mainly on temperature and precipitation, and they play a vital role in maintaining global biodiversity and ecological stability. Another important biome. Now, let us discuss population ecology and community ecology, two important branches of ecology that explain how populations and communities are organized and maintained in nature. Population ecology deals with the study of populations and the factors that influence their size, structure, distribution, and growth. A population is defined as a group of individuals belonging to the same species and occupying a particular geographical area. The characteristics of a population include population size, density, natality, mortality, age structure, and sex ratio. These parameters help ecologists understand population dynamics and predict future changes. One of the most important concepts in population ecology is carrying capacity, denoted by the letter K. Carrying capacity refers to the maximum number of individuals that an environment can support sustainably with the available resources. When the population reaches its carrying capacity, growth slows down and eventually stabilizes. Population growth generally follows two models. The exponential growth model produces a J-shaped curve and occurs when resources are unlimited. In contrast, logistic growth produces an S-shaped curve and occurs under limited resources, where environmental resistance regulates population size. Populations also exhibit fluctuations due to seasonal changes, availability of food, predation, diseases, climate, and human activities. Another important concept is dispersion, which refers to the pattern of distribution of individuals within a population. Dispersion may be clumped, uniform, or random. Closely related to this is the concept of metapopulation, which refers to a group of spatially separated populations of the same species that interact through migration and gene flow. Species are often categorized into R-selected and K-selected species. R-selected species are characterized by rapid growth, early maturity, high reproductive rate, short lifespan, and little parental care. Examples include insects, weeds, and rodents. In contrast, K-selected species possess slower growth, fewer offspring, longer lifespans, and greater parental care. Examples include elephants, whales, and humans. Another ecologically important concept is the keystone species. A keystone species exerts a disproportionately large influence on ecosystem structure and function relative to its abundance. The removal of a keystone species may lead to significant changes in community composition and ecological balance. Let us now move to community ecology. A community consists of populations of different species living together and interacting within a particular area. Community ecology focuses on these interactions and their influence on ecosystem structure and stability. Among species interactions, predation is a positive-negative interaction in which one organism, called the predator, captures and consumes another organism known as the prey. Herbivory involves animals feeding on plants and influences vegetation structure and productivity. Parasitism is another positive-negative interaction in which the parasite derives benefit while causing harm to the host organism. Allelopathy refers to the release of chemical substances by one plant species that inhibit the growth and development of neighboring plants. This interaction plays an important role in competition among plants. Community ecology also deals with biological invasions. Invasive species are non-native organisms that establish themselves in new habitats and adversely affect native biodiversity, ecosystem functioning, and economic activities. Examples include Parthenium hysterophorus, Lantana camara, and water hyacinth. From the UGC NET examination perspective, special emphasis should be given to carrying capacity, logistic and exponential growth models, R-selected and K-selected species, keystone species, and different types of species interactions. Therefore, population ecology explains how populations grow and are regulated, whereas community ecology focuses on interactions among species that ultimately determine ecosystem structure, stability, and biodiversity. A community consists of. Now, let us discuss biodiversity and its conservation, one of the most important and frequently asked topics in UGC NET Environmental Science. Biodiversity refers to the variety and variability of life forms present on Earth. It encompasses diversity at three different levels, namely genetic diversity, species diversity, and ecosystem diversity. Genetic diversity refers to the variation in genes within a species. It provides the raw material for evolution and enables species to adapt to changing environmental conditions. Species diversity represents the variety and relative abundance of different species present within a particular ecosystem or geographical region. Ecosystem diversity refers to the diversity of habitats, ecological processes, and ecosystems existing in a region. Biodiversity plays a crucial role in maintaining ecological balance, ensuring ecosystem productivity, providing food and medicinal resources, regulating climate, and supporting various ecosystem services essential for human well-being. However, biodiversity is increasingly threatened by habitat destruction, deforestation, overexploitation, pollution, invasive species, and climate change. These threats have accelerated species extinction and disrupted ecosystem functioning. An important concept in biodiversity conservation is that of biodiversity hotspots. Now, a biodiversity hotspot is a region characterized by exceptionally high species richness and endemism that is under severe threat due to habitat loss. According to Norman Myers, a region must contain at least 1,500 endemic vascular plant species and must have lost more than 70% of its original habitat to qualify as a hotspot. India possesses 4 biodiversity hotspots, namely the Himalaya, Western Ghats and Sri Lanka, Indo-Burma region, and Sundaland, which includes the Nicobar Islands. Biodiversity is measured using parameters such as species richness, species evenness, and diversity indices. Species richness refers to the total number of species present in a community. Species evenness describes the relative abundance and distribution of individuals among species. Commonly used diversity indices include the Shannon-Wiener Index and Simpson's Diversity Index, which quantitatively evaluate biodiversity within ecosystems. Conservation of biodiversity may be achieved through in situ, ex situ, and in vitro conservation strategies. A biodiversity in situ conservation refers to the protection of species within their natural habitats. National parks, wildlife sanctuaries, biosphere reserves, and sacred groves are examples of in situ conservation. Ex situ conservation involves protecting species outside their natural habitats. Zoos, botanical gardens, seed banks, gene banks, and captive breeding programs are important examples of ex situ conservation. In vitro conservation utilizes tissue culture and cryopreservation techniques to preserve plant genetic resources under laboratory conditions. Protected areas constitute an important approach to biodiversity conservation. National parks are strictly protected areas established for the conservation of ecosystems and wildlife, with limited human interference. Wildlife sanctuaries provide protection to animals while permitting certain regulated human activities. Sacred groves are patches of natural vegetation protected by local communities because of their cultural and religious significance. They serve as reservoirs of biodiversity and are important examples of traditional conservation practices. Another important concept is the gene pool. The gene pool represents the total collection of genes present within a population or species. A rich gene pool enhances adaptability and evolutionary potential. Modern conservation biology also addresses the issues of biopiracy and bioprospecting. Biopiracy refers to the unauthorized exploitation and commercialization of biological resources and traditional knowledge without providing benefits to indigenous communities. Bioprospecting, on the other hand, is the systematic exploration of biological resources for commercially valuable compounds used in pharmaceuticals, agriculture, and biotechnology. In situ conservation restoration ecology is another emerging field that focuses on the recovery and rehabilitation of degraded ecosystems. Restoration measures include reforestation, habitat reconstruction, reclamation, and rebuilding. Based on their conservation status, species may be categorized as extinct, rare, endangered, or threatened. Extinct species are those that no longer exist anywhere on Earth. Rare species occur in small populations and have restricted distributions. Endangered species face a very high risk of extinction in the near future. Threatened species are likely to become endangered if appropriate conservation measures are not implemented. The concept of industrial ecology emphasizes designing industrial systems that mimic natural ecosystems. It promotes resource efficiency, waste minimization, recycling, and sustainable development. From the UGC NET examination perspective, special emphasis should be given to biodiversity hotspots, the 4 hotspots of India, Shannon-Wiener Index, in situ and ex situ conservation, sacred groves, gene pool, biopiracy, bioprospecting, restoration ecology, and categories of threatened species. Therefore, biodiversity conservation is essential for maintaining ecological balance, ensuring sustainable development, and safeguarding the biological heritage of future generations. Restoration. Now, let us discuss toxicology, microbiology, and environmental biotechnology, which together form an important section of environmental biology and are frequently asked in the UGC NET Environmental Science examination. Let us begin with toxicology. Toxicology is the branch of science that deals with the harmful effects of chemical substances and pollutants on living organisms. It studies how toxic agents enter the body, their distribution, metabolism, and eventual elimination. The process through which toxic substances move within the body is often referred to as ADME, which stands for absorption, distribution, metabolism, and excretion. Absorption is the process by which toxic substances enter the body through the respiratory tract, digestive system, or skin. Distribution refers to the transport of toxic substances through blood and body fluids to various tissues and organs. Biotransformation, also known as metabolism, involves the conversion of toxic compounds into more water-soluble forms, primarily in the liver, to facilitate their elimination. Excretion is the removal of toxic substances from the body through urine, feces, sweat, and exhaled air. Based on the duration and intensity of exposure, toxicity may be classified into acute toxicity and chronic toxicity. Acute toxicity results from short-term exposure to high concentrations of toxic substances and produces immediate harmful effects. Now, chronic toxicity develops due to prolonged exposure to low concentrations of toxic agents and may lead to cancer, mutagenesis, teratogenesis, and other long-term health effects. Another important concept in toxicology is bioassay. A bioassay is a method used to determine the toxicity of pollutants by observing their effects on living organisms. Fish bioassays, Daphnia bioassays, and plant bioassays are commonly employed in environmental monitoring. Several toxicological parameters are important from the UGC NET perspective. Threshold limit value, or TLV, refers to the maximum concentration of a substance to which an individual can be exposed without causing adverse effects. Margin of safety, abbreviated as MOS, represents the ratio between the dose causing harmful effects and the actual exposure level. Therapeutic index is defined as the ratio of lethal dose to effective dose and is an indicator of drug safety. Biotransformation is a detoxification process that converts harmful compounds into less toxic forms, mainly through enzymatic reactions occurring in the liver. Chronic toxicity develops due to prolonged exposure to low concentrations of toxic agents and may lead to cancer, mutagenesis, teratogenesis, and other long-term health effects. Another important concept in toxicology is bioassay. A bioassay is a method used to determine the toxicity of pollutants by observing their effects on living organisms. Fish bioassays, Daphnia bioassays, and plant bioassays are commonly employed in environmental monitoring. Several toxicological parameters are important from the UGC NET perspective. Threshold limit value, or TLV, refers to the maximum concentration of a substance to which an individual can be exposed without causing adverse effects. Margin of safety, abbreviated as MOS, represents the ratio between the dose causing harmful effects and the actual exposure level. Therapeutic index is defined as the ratio of lethal dose to effective dose and is an indicator of drug safety. Biotransformation is a detoxification process that converts harmful compounds into less toxic forms, mainly through enzymatic reactions occurring in the liver. Chronic toxic lichens are excellent indicators of air pollution, whereas certain aquatic organisms are indicators of water quality. Biofertilizers are preparations containing beneficial microorganisms that enhance soil fertility and plant growth. Examples include Rhizobium, Azotobacter, Azospirillum, and blue-green algae. These microorganisms improve nutrient availability and reduce dependence on chemical fertilizers. Biofuels are renewable fuels produced from biological materials. Examples include bioethanol, biodiesel, biogas, and biohydrogen. Biofuels provide eco-friendly alternatives to conventional fossil fuels and contribute to sustainable energy development. Biosensors are analytical devices that combine biological components with electronic systems to detect pollutants and monitor environmental quality. Enzyme-based biosensors and DNA biosensors are increasingly used for environmental monitoring and public health applications. From the UGC NET examination perspective, particular emphasis should be placed on acute and chronic toxicity, bioassays, threshold limit value, margin of safety, therapeutic index, waterborne diseases, bioremediation, bioindicators, biofertilizers, biofuels, and biosensors. Thus, toxicology helps us understand the adverse effects of pollutants. Microbiology explains the role of microorganisms in health and ecosystems, and environmental biotechnology provides innovative biological solutions for pollution control and sustainable environmental management. Together, these disciplines contribute significantly to environmental protection and the achievement of sustainable development. Lichens are excellent. Now, let us conclude Unit 3 of Environmental Biology with a quick revision of the most important concepts and high-yield topics frequently asked in the UGC NET Environmental Science examination. First, let us understand the difference between habitat and niche. Habitat refers to the physical place where an organism lives, whereas niche represents the functional role played by that organism within an ecosystem. In simple terms, habitat is the address of an organism, while niche is its profession. Species diversity can be studied at three levels. Alpha diversity represents diversity within a particular habitat. Beta diversity refers to the variation in species composition between habitats, and gamma diversity indicates the overall diversity of a larger geographical region. Another important concept is ecological succession. Primary succession begins on barren surfaces where soil is absent and proceeds very slowly. Secondary succession occurs in previously inhabited areas where soil is already present and therefore progresses more rapidly. Population ecology introduces the concepts of R-selected and K-selected species. R-selected species are characterized by rapid growth, high reproductive rates, and short lifespans, whereas K-selected species exhibit slower growth, fewer offspring, and greater parental care. Now, the distinction between lotic and lentic ecosystems is also important. Lotic ecosystems consist of flowing water bodies, such as rivers and streams, while lentic ecosystems include stagnant water bodies, such as lakes and ponds. Keystone species are species that exert a disproportionately large influence on ecosystem structure and stability relative to their abundance. Their removal may significantly alter community composition and ecological functioning. India is recognized as one of the megadiverse countries of the world and contains 4 biodiversity hotspots: the Himalaya, Western Ghats and Sri Lanka, Indo-Burma, and Sundaland, including the Nicobar Islands. Conservation strategies may be classified into in situ and ex situ conservation. In situ conservation protects organisms within their natural habitats through national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, biosphere reserves, and sacred groves. Ex situ conservation involves the protection of species outside their natural habitats through zoos, botanical gardens, seed banks, and gene banks. Another important distinction is between biopiracy and bioprospecting. Biopiracy refers to the unauthorized commercial exploitation of biological resources and traditional knowledge, whereas bioprospecting involves the systematic exploration of biological resources for useful products with proper benefit sharing. The distinction in toxicology, acute toxicity results from short-term exposure to high concentrations of toxic substances, while chronic toxicity arises due to long-term exposure and may lead to cumulative adverse effects. Bioindicators and biosensors are important tools in environmental monitoring. Bioindicators are living organisms used to assess environmental quality, whereas biosensors are analytical devices that combine biological components with electronic systems to detect pollutants. From the examination perspective, special emphasis should be placed on habitat versus niche, alpha, beta and gamma diversity, primary versus secondary succession, R-selected and K-selected species, lotic and lentic ecosystems, biodiversity hotspots of India, in situ and ex situ conservation, biopiracy and bioprospecting, acute and chronic toxicity, and the applications of bioindicators and biosensors. With this, we have successfully completed Unit 3, Environmental Biology. This unit provides the ecological foundation necessary to understand ecosystem functioning, biodiversity conservation, environmental health, and sustainable development. A thorough understanding of these concepts will not only strengthen your conceptual knowledge but also enhance your performance in the UGC NET Environmental Science examination. Thank you for learning with Rush Learning Hub. In the next unit, we will continue our journey into another important area of environmental science. Until then, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep growing. In toxicology,